Okay, good morning. Today we're going to start off with chapter 3, which is order processing. So last week we saw how product comes in off of a trailer and how it's received in the warehouse, it's staged, and then how it's put away on shelving or in pallets. Now we're going to go to the next step is when like the customer wants something from our warehouse, how do we go about fulfilling that order? And there's a couple different ways that you're going to attack this, and it's based on what kind of order it is or what kind of product that you deal with. But some basic information is the information that's located within the warehouse is called a SKU, and these SKUs basically are specific to an item. They tell all the information about the product that's in that SKU, and it helps customers order a specific item, and it also helps us inventory and know where it's at in our warehouse. And this example that we're looking at is for a nail. And as you can see that within that SKU, there is a lot of information there. So it tells what the diameter of the nail, what type of a shank it has, if it's round or flat or threaded, how long it is, if it has, what kind of finish it has on it, what kind of a point, and then how big of a coil it comes in. And then there's all these designated codes that let the manufacturer tell you what the product is. And so you're going to get that on any kind of a product that's within an inventory. It's going to help us keep track of what special storage requirements are, handling or packaging and that type of stuff. So this is probably the most costly part of the entire supply chain, is paying people to go out and select orders to package together and load them on a truck. It's got the most labor intensive. There's more injuries here. There's more of a turnover because it's not a very glamorous job picking up boxes and stacking things on pallets. For folks in the industry, it's like a rite of passage. You would go through this, so you really do understand the order selection process. And even executives, I've worked in a couple warehouses as a consultant, and the first thing I ask is how many supervisors know how to select an order. And they all say they know how to, but when I'm there for things like reducing turnover, trying to get the workforce happier and improving their training, making sure that they are taught the correct and safe way to do things. That's probably my two biggest services that I'm asked to do when I do third-party stuff. So I spend my first couple hours on site with the supervisors, having them select orders. And so it's usually where one of the major pitfalls is the supervisors don't understand order selection, and they're supervising other people to do that. And it kind of is a humbling experience for some of them who haven't done it maybe in 10 years or so, just to let them know what their workforce is subjected to as far as the weight that they have to handle and the pressures to try to make certain times to make sure that a trailer gets loaded on time and those kind of things. So it is if you want to call it the roughest job, but this is where people that are going to be successful in the field, they do well at this, they help others do well at it, and then they become a trainer or they become a team leader, and they move on up through the different types of jobs in the warehouse from that point. So if you're just starting out or you find yourself in a order selector type position, there's no wrong with that. I mean, you're really learning the moving parts in that warehouse, and there is a future that's less labor intensive. For the most part, we're moving towards automation to handle heavier items and multiple items. So within your working experience, you're going to see a lot of this manual labor stuff taken away. So the importance, of course, it's the highest focused area, because if you're handling the material that belongs to your customer and you damage it, or you don't get them the order that they want, you don't get it correct, the reputation of your company is in jeopardy. And so there's the expenses for replacing damaged equipment or lost orders, it's insurmountable. So all that expense gets put into this section called order picking. Not only the labor, but all the losses and all the damage to reputation and all that stuff gets lumped into there. That's why it is the most expensive. So it says about 63% of all operating costs are in this area. So, I mean, it's that type of an opportunity to reduce costs by doing things smarter instead of harder. So we get this order that's in, and normally it comes electronically, like somebody orders something online through an app or something, it will come to the supplier, to like Amazon or whatever, as a order to be filled either that day or the next day, or, you know, they prioritize them. And so if we use the example of like a Kroger store, and we have an inventory in that store, the retail site, that it's affected during the day as people buy groceries or they check out, the cash register is linked into the inventory system that says, okay, now we need 2 of this, now we need 6 of it. When it gets up to where it's a case, there's usually an automatic mechanism that replenishes that shelf to make sure that it still has stuff available to you.
Professor Yancey, sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing like the actual book? Because I'm not sure if it's just me, but I have a sign that says like eager to gain knowledge or whatever it is.
Thank you for saving me a whole couple hours of embarrassment there.
No, you're good, because I just wanted to make sure it wasn't just me.
I'm going to make sure I get the right screen shared here.
No, he's right. I was about to say the same thing.
It's, yeah, it's just me getting my mojo going here this morning. I'll get it squared away. All right, so let me get the right screen showing in front. Here we go. I open that file. That's not what I want. Where's what I want? Okay, still looking for what I opened. I was looking at it for a minute. Okay, here we go. And now let me make sure I share the right screen here. Let's try this again. Okay, we got the book now?
Yes, sir.
All right. Wonder if I turn myself off, if it'll make it a little bit bigger for you. All right. And I can magnify this. I think I have an ability to do that, because it's sometimes it's a little tough to see if you got a phone or something, but
I think it's in the bottom right-hand corner, the plus and minus sign.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. All right, so we've got, remember when you were trying to buy toilet paper in the early days of the pandemic and it was nowhere to be had, the system was set up to like, okay, one person bought a roll of toilet paper, and then on the 12th customer, it says, okay, there's a case of toilet paper that needs to be replenished. And so if there was a truck that was supposed to be delivering to that Kroger store at 3 o'clock, by about 1 o'clock, all the final stuff that was going to be on that truck had to be in. Well, by 1 o'clock, there was 1,000 rolls of toilet paper that went through that checkout. And so now they need, 80 cases of toilet paper. And the warehouse that supplies them may only have 200 cases in stock, because that was what the normal consumption was for that store. And so they have to back order and say, hey, we only have shelf space for 200 cases, but one store needed 80 cases. And now we're looking at our other 25 stores, they all need 80 or 100 cases. And so it just was a whiplash effect, like you're riding a roller coaster. That last person in the last car gets the biggest whip. That's what was happening at the shelf while we were trying to catch up with the demand. Notice there's no shortage now because every closet in America is full of toilet paper. So there's plenty to go around. But this selection here is when you're pickling, it's in the environment of just in time. And so instead of that Kroger store having maybe 50 rows and then half of their building space was a warehouse in the back of the Kroger store, now the entire Kroger store is shelving for retail, and there's just a small little dock back there that they bring truckloads in every day. So this just in time is another reason that we had that shortage of toilet paper, is there wasn't this back stock at any of those locations. And it's fine when it works, but there's times when it's really a challenge to make getting product as you need it. It has to have a very strong transportation cycle, and it has to have very strong suppliers. And if you only had one supplier that was doing well on getting the product to you, your backup suppliers weren't coming through. That kind of is one of the mishaps when you work with just in time. You have to have very strong suppliers. So it talks about always looking at better ways to select the order. And we're going to look at different ways that you can select an order. So in our computer chapter 9, we talked about warehouse management system. And this is basically, if you want to say it's an Excel spreadsheet or it's an inventory spreadsheet that knows the location of everything within a warehouse. And when something comes in, those location numbers go up, so the inventory is reflected as to what just came in. And when stuff ships out to those retail spaces, that inventory goes down to reflect that it needs replenished or we need to contact our suppliers. And so now we know supposedly what's on hand in a retail site and in a warehouse and the distribution that's behind that warehouse, so that sends us the stuff as we ask for it, all the way back to the manufacturer saying, oh my, we need to make a lot more toilet paper. So this system's all interlocked. That's the supply chain. This kind of is an example of a pick list. And when we say pick, we're actually going to pick the different items that are in an order that a store needs. So say that a Kroger store needed to have health and beauty aids, and they need to have, with the toilet paper and that, and they needed to have food items that were frozen, food items that were refrigerated, food items that were dry. So there's all these different types of product that as we are ordering it from the warehouse, is coming from different places in that warehouse. On the same token, when it gets selected and it gets taken to the door where the trailer is that's going to go to that store, it could be that that trailer is refrigerated. And so anything that has to be frozen would go in front of that trailer. And then the stuff that just needed to be refrigerated might be the second level of stuff. They put a wall up, and then there's a second level that would keep it, within 40 degrees. And then there's a third level that's dry or vegetation that doesn't need that much refrigeration. That would be closest to the door. So all of those things go into planning. Whenever you're selecting an order, you have to think ahead of, okay, how's that order going to leave the warehouse and what do we need to make that happen? But besides having a paper pick list, which is only in very small or specialized warehouses where they have small inventory, or it has to be precise, or they don't do a lot of shipping. For the most part, it's automated. And the way it would come to you through automation is either it comes in as a electronic order that you can hear through headphones, and there's a voice, a computerized voice that's telling you where to go in the warehouse to find that particular item. And it's in the headset, so you don't have, you got hands free. And normally you would have either like a something that went on your finger that was like a light pin. And when you got to that location, you point at it and it would tell you you're at the right place. And then it'll say, take 2 or 3 cases or a pallet or what have you. And then it takes you to your next selecting spot. One of the items that we have set up in our lab here is called a pick-to-light. And so if you can imagine all that shelving having lights on it, and you get an order that says start in aisle 1, every one of those positions that has something that you need to take for that order has a light that's turned on. And so you go to the first light and it'll say like 2 will be in a little window, a digital window. When you take those 2 off, you press that light and then it sends you to the next, you'll see the next light come on in that aisle. And it can be set up where all the lights are on in the aisle, or it does them sequentially so you can start at the order and end at the order. If there's more than one person, you know, they normally have all the lights on, and you guys, ladies can like leapfrog where I'm picking this when you go on to the next one and pick that flashing, or however the order is selected. So that pick-to-light technology works in reverse. If I'm putting stuff away, when we talked about storage in the last chapter, it actually will tell me what shelf to put product on. So that light will be on and it'll say, put your 2 cases of toilet paper on this shelf. Once you put it on the shelf, you press the green light, then it sends you to the next position to put things on the shelf. So it's got pick or put. We're talking right now about picking. So they have different ways that you can pick. You can do that single order like I was talking about. So I got one store in Shelbyville and they want this much stuff. And so I'm out there just finding the stuff that Shelbyville Kroger needs out of our inventory, and I'm putting it in an order form. They can have a zone. And remember I said that you would have stuff that was frozen food, stuff that was vegetation, stuff that was dry food. It could be that your job is to just take care of stuff that's in the freezer because you're going to do 4 hours there. Then you can take some of the heavier clothing off and work in another section. And if you worked in the area where they had vegetation that sprays mist all the time, that gets into a little bit of a safety issue if you've just been sprayed with mist and then you go back in the freezer. You could fall, you could get frostbite, all kinds of things. So this is also a photo of the pick-to-light where the operator is pressing a button that he's selecting off of the shelf. So that's what your photograph is up there. And so in the zone, you're only staying in that one area, like the freezer or the rainforest where they've got the vegetation that's keeping it moist, or you're in the dry area. And so you would just pick the stuff that's in that physical location that you're assigned to, and you would take it to a staging area near the dock doors to go with the rest of the order that store in Shelbyville ordered. So you see your frozen stuff show up. It usually gets picked last, and that's because they don't want it out of the freezer and sitting on the dock for 30 minutes while they're getting the rest of the order loaded in the truck. And if it's got anything frozen, then it's going to go on a refrigerated trailer. And so it goes on first. So depending on how much there is of the frozen stuff and how much there is of the rest of the order, it could be keyed up to be picked first. Then they put it on the trailer and it's got the refrigeration running, and they put the wall up. And so now that stuff's protected, and then they can load the rest of the stuff. I've seen it run both ways. If they pick it last, then that's also a key that, okay, now everything's here and we can load the trailer. And so as that order comes in as the last thing that's picked, it gets put on the trailer first. And then they put the barrier up to keep the front of that trailer the coldest. And then they put the rest of the refrigerated items and then the non-refrigerated. So picking from the zone, I see that probably one of the common things in the food retail. If you've got stuff that is very similar, you may not need to do that. You could go with this multi-order picking. So let's say that there's a Shelbyville store and there's a store in Greensburg that's the next stop. You could be picking for both of those stores because it's going to go on the same trailer and it's going to leave your warehouse at the same time. And so you've got one pallet that's going to have things that are going to Shelbyville, and you got a second pallet on your pallet jack that's got things that are going to go to Greensburg. And so you're still picking within your zone, but you're picking for two different customers, and you're going to deliver that to the dock so it can be sorted. Here's Greensburg stuff. It's the farthest destination. Let's put it in first. Then here's Shelbyville stuff. If it's frozen, sometimes they actually deliver all the things that aren't frozen, and then they take off that first half of the order for like Shelbyville. When they're at Shelbyville, they take their frozen stuff out. Then they go back down to Greensburg and they give them their frozen stuff. Depending on the sizes of the orders, there's different transportation solutions to help it. So here's another picture of that order picker where you're standing on the machine and it's raising you up. So we got within those two types of picking, you can do them three different ways. Pick to order, and so you would have like start at aisle A and go to aisle Z, and you're going to pick everything that store ordered. Then you got batch picking. That's like you're going to pick everything on aisle 1, and you're going to take that to the door, and then you go to aisle 2. So you're picking and you're grouping orders together. And then you got pick by line or pick to zero. And so your job, say it's Thanksgiving, is to bring all the turkeys to all the trucks. And so you go over there and you better be in good shape, because those boxes of turkeys are 60 or 80 pounds, every one of them. And so you're doing 10 cases at a time. Then you're taking that to a door to be loaded on a truck. Then you come back and you get 10 more cases of turkeys. You take it to a different door. That is a suck job. And most of the time that only rotates around. We only do 2 or 3 of those, and then some other operator picks up the next 2 or 3 of those, because that would be, you get muscle failure working that for a shift. So you try to set up what has went out. The automation in the warehouse management system knows that you have just picked up 10 cases of 60-pound boxes, and it will send you on something to give you a chance to recover before it sends you back into that situation. So depending on how the warehouse is set up, that's how Kroger's warehouses are set up, that they rotate the physical demands of the operators along with the zones and the pick by line and batch picking. All of that's incorporated into that software. So it makes decisions a lot better than humans could. It's keeping track, where if I'm a supervisor and I got 40 people, I can't keep track of who was just in the freezer. The software does that for me. So when we're looking at efficiencies on this section over here about did you know, let's take a look at that. And it says 55% of the time spent selecting an order is traveling between the pick locations. And so like Amazon and larger operations, they use carousels, and they also have automated equipment that actually brings the product to the selector. And so that keeps that person from moving all over these huge, some of them are 50, 60 acres large warehouses. And so that 55% of the time can be reduced in some point by bringing those locations closer, or clarifying a route, or having carousels that push the product closer to you. 20% of it is reaching and bending and sorting, packing, and documenting what you've selected. And so when we look at the ways that they've improved that, they pick it by batch. They use carts with totes, and they have dividers to separate these little smaller items. And then everything that's being selected, when you point at it with this laser pen, or you tell it through the speaker, selected to, the document, if you want to call it that, is automated. And so you don't have to stop and make a check mark or say a missing to or whatever on a piece of paper. It's automated. We look at the third percentage of the time, it's 15% searching for the pick location. And I've been involved in trying to help this. This is part of the learning curve, figuring out where things are within a warehouse. And usually the aisles are numbered or lettered. And so I know for the previous warehouses that had freezers in them, the first, whatever, if there's 40 aisles in that, are all freezer. So aisle 1 through 40, you knew you were going to all the way to the other end of the warehouse to that freezer. Then 41 to 60 had 20 aisles of vegetables. So you knew you were going into the rainforest. And then 60 to 99 had the dry goods. So knowing where things are located takes a little bit. It's like map reading, and it's memorizing which rows are one way and all this kind of stuff. But again, it's saying that you could use carousels. You could use these automated guided vehicles to bring things to the right, the operators to the right section, or to bring the product to the staging area so that you don't even have to go out into the warehouse. And then 10% extracting materials from locations, like reaching in and pulling the boxes off the shelf. Automated dispensing, like we were talking about, like a pop machine where they have these coiled carousels that they can load from the top and gravity feeds them down to the bottom. A-frames where they can load it from the top and they feed to the bottom. Those take a lot of the lifting out of it because it puts it at the right height, like 40 to 43 inches, where it's like waist high. You can just pull it off of a section there and not have to bend over or reach to get it. So these are the different ways that when you are a supervisor and when you're working on ways to lessen the workload for your people, these are the different areas that you can focus on to save money for your company and save manual labor for your workforce. So this talks about, the next section is about increasing accuracy. And the label, this is the old school stuff where they give you this piece of paper or two that has stickers on it. And on the sticker, it's going to tell you go to aisle 1 to shelf position number A, the first one on aisle 1. When you get there, there's 3 stickers. So you take those 3 stickers, you put them on 3 boxes, and you put those on your cart. Normally that label is going to have a barcode on it that tells what that particular item was, what store ordered it, what trailer it's going to be on. So there's more information on that label than just what the contents of that pick slot is. That takes the longest time, and it also is the most inaccurate because you can stick a sticker on the wrong thing, or the sticker can fall off. I mean, try sticking something to a frozen case of ice cream. It ain't happening. So it is the least effective way, but it's listed under these improving accuracy and effective, right? A label's better than nothing. So then it's talking about using pack optimization. So if I needed, say on this toilet paper order, and I needed 80 cases, and let's say that 90 cases made it, that's probably a poor example, but let's just say 90 cases would equal out to a truckload, and all the pallets would be kept intact. So instead of going out on a shelf and pulling 90 cases, I could just go into a bulk area and pick up pallets full of the product and put it on the truck. So they give discounts, and it takes a lot of time off when you're ordering these things in bulk that don't have to be taken apart down into packages and cases. If they can keep it, the larger the shipment, the less it's handled, the more accurate it is, and the easier it is to stack it and put it into a trailer. They've got pick task simplification. It lets you combine things like in batch ordering, where when you're picking it, you're selecting all of the stuff like the turkeys, or you're getting all the toilet paper that several different orders need. And so if I do this pick and I'm down the aisle where there's toilet paper, and right next to it is Kleenex, and they need 10 cases of Kleenex. If I pick that toilet paper up and the Kleenex while I'm out there, I just saved another trip going back for the Kleenex. And if I'm picking it for 2 stories, I saved 3 trips because I just did it all in one, and I would have had to went back there 4 times to get those 2 different stores, those 2 different items. And so that cut down on the travel time considerably by 1/4. And then this is probably what I see in the most forward-thinking operations is if I have a sale item, let's say it's detergent or whatever. What's the next one? We got Easter coming up, right? So let's say that I have food items for Easter. I don't know what they are really, if people make turkeys or whatever. Probably eggs is the biggest seller around Easter, right? And so the end of each aisle would probably have this setup for these high volume items that are going to be in every order to make it easier to go select those high volume items. They're picked forward. They put them at the end of an aisle, like at the head of it, or they'll pre-stage those out by the dock where instead of going into the warehouse to find these eggs, I know I'm going to be selling 10 times as many during Easter week. I've got them pre-staged where I can just go 10 feet instead of to the other end of the warehouse in the refrigerated area to find the eggs. So this forward picking is when you know you got a large number of one thing or several things to get it closer to the dock. Of course, barcodes are important because that keeps track of what the item is and where it is when it enters into the inventory. And then these radio terminals, these RFID tags, they're much smaller than that now. I mean, you've bought things that had much smaller RFID tags on. This is smaller than the stuff in clothing even. But within your phone, there's probably 24 of these little RFID chips on parts that are so small, it's ridiculous. So your phone could probably have about 70 or 80 of those in it from different components. So this goes back to give a more in-depth look at pick the light systems. And basically we're going to scan a code that's telling the order that we're going to go pick. And then all of these lights come on to tell us where to go put it, pick it. And then the put part, we explained that it's exactly opposite. When we scan a order that we're going to replenish or put on the shelf, the lights come on where you put the actual product. And this has got a picture of the lady with the headphones. The voice recognition system is about the size of your phone, and you usually wear it in your pocket or on a clip. And it's what tells you where to go. A voice tells you where to go within the item to get it. Okay. So somebody took their CLA. Great. So we got, now you've got this order picked. And you've got several of these operators on pallet jacks that have product on them. Some of these pallets are full, some of them are partially full. So they come up to the staging area. And I say staging area, that means it's not in front of a trailer. It could be beside a trailer, the space between the doors. It could be 50 feet out from the trailer. Because they usually try to construct what the load's going to look like within that 50 feet. They're putting stuff together as it should be loaded, but it goes into a staging area. Now there's usually a new person that's called like a checker, that's a quality control person that actually has some type of device handheld or on their finger where they can point at the whole load because it's been given a order number, and that order number is entered into the warehouse management system. So when they point at it, it'll say, oh, you're missing 2 cases of toilet paper. And so then they can find out if it's in stock or if it needs to be back ordered. So there's a last check there for accuracy. And then they also want to make sure that when it was being handled and it came up to the front, nothing fell off and the damaged the boxes or anything. So they're also checking to make sure that the order is still in pristine condition. And this is where they're going to come up with different strategies to either stack partial pallets onto full pallets. And if you use some type of machinery, which we'll get into in the packing chapter, that allows you to put a wrap around it, a plastic wrap, you can go all the way up to 7 feet. So probably a basic pallet is somewhere between 3.5 to 4 feet high. And you can actually make a tall or a double pallet that goes all the way up to 7 feet. If it's stacked right, and if it's wrapped tight, high and tight. So this is talking about the scanning. You may hear this term marshalling area, and that's interchangeable with staging area, but it basically means bringing part of your load to one site until the whole load's put together. So we've got them staged, and now we are working on getting the right product into the right trailer going to the right destination. And they got this term, which you will see on the test. It's called kitting. No, I'm not kidding. It's a kitting. And it's basically building a kit. And the example they used here is you've got a computer you ordered online, and there's certain type of memory and drives and peripherals, keyboards, monitors, software, all the stuff that goes to that customer to make that computer operational and fulfill what the order was. They make like a kit. And so here's all the stuff you need, batteries included. And so kitting is when they put all these separate items that are related into a group, and it could be packaged together. It could even have a one order number for it, but you will hear that term. And so it's making a kit. That's what kitting is. And so once we've got it palletized and they're segregated into what goes on first, what goes on second, it's going to take a lot of the time off of loading it if all this stuff is done ahead of time. Because when it comes time to load a trailer, the clock's on, and we have to get that trailer off of that door within a certain time. I know Kroger's, I think the longest you could have was like 90 minutes from the time that door opened to have the load put in it. And so they could have started picking that load 2 hours before to give them some slack there. And so those items are setting up there on the dock 30 minutes or so before they even raise the door and start putting things in the trailer. In other places, they don't have that much staging room. So they bring the stuff from the shelf, and they actually have the order set up where the heaviest or the first things that need to be on the trailer are selected first. And so as it's selected, it's brought right to the trailer, and then someone loads it into the trailer. So depending on constraints of size, and depending on if they figured out why handle it twice, why not while it's on a fork, put it all the way into the trailer. It really depends on how the operation's set up. So we've got it all in there. We checked the order to make sure it's right. Now we're checking the documents. And one last time before that door gets closed, we make sure that everything is set in there and nothing's going to move around. We're going to talk about that stuff in the next chapter. But everything that was ordered is in that trailer, and it's ready to go to the right place, and it's going to get there at the right time. So any questions about order selection? I know that's a lot of stuff. This is probably the healthiest chapter. But again, this is the area that you can make a big difference even from your first day on the job. And as supervisors and team leaders, which is what we're gearing you to be, and warehouse managers, knowing the cycles and everything that's involved in selection is where you can cut cost, time, and you can protect your workforce from injury. So it's an important aspect of warehousing. All right. So chapter 4, a little simpler, a little shorter. It's about packaging and shipping. And you folks had an assignment to go back like 3 different levels on packaging. And those are kind of explained in chapter 4 here, where it's got the product and it has a primary package. So, you know, like this is showing a CD. You can tell how old this book is. My last 2 computers I bought didn't even have CD drives in them. But you've got the primary product, or its primary packaging, and then you got a secondary packaging. It goes into like a case. They don't just have these CD cases thrown around. It goes into a case, a couple hundred in there, right? And then you got it set up for transport packaging. And so several of those cases are on a pallet, and then they're wrapped with this cellophane, this shrink wrap that keeps it from moving around. And so your assignment was to pick a product and show its primary packaging, its secondary packaging, and its transport packaging. And the ones that I've seen so far, they all, you folks understood it and you got that in there. So when we look at packaging, it explains that the primary packaging can be a blister pack, you know, those clear things that you have to have a chainsaw to open. Logistics, our field is who created those. And we had to. How do you ship light bulbs or electronics or high cost, high value items? You want to protect them from getting pilfered. You want to protect them from getting wet or crushed. That was the main purpose that those were invented. And now they're used for like security purposes. I mean, you can't buy a ink cartridge without going through, you know, Fort Knox to get to a cabinet to get your ink that you want, because it's a high dollar item, I guess. But so we got that primary packaging, which could be that blister pack, or it could be a box or a can that actually holds the product. Secondary, they're saying it's usually a carton or a box, a cardboard box or whatever. And the third is usually on a pallet with protected covering, and it's calling it a polyurethane sheet, but it's like saran wrap, a little bit thicker. So it defines preparing a product for shipment is what packaging is. And so there's the figures we took a look at there. Repack or small package lines are very common. So let's say that you're not wanting a whole case of something like chapstick. The case would have 1,000 chapsticks in it. And you probably only want a box, or maybe, you know, that has 100, or maybe only want 50. So they break those bulk items down into smaller packages, and then they repack them into things like cartons or bags or smaller different items that they can seal up and they can put a label on. So when they look at what's involved with packing, it's the product protection, that's job one. Then line side packing quantity. So we want to make sure that it's in quantities that are used. 10,000 is not used that often. And so maybe a dozen, 24. It usually is commensurate with the shelf space. And so if I had like a small can of soup, that probably would come in a 12 or a 24 box. If it was like a half gallon or 2 quarts of soup, then that probably would come in a 6 instead of a 12 or a 24. And so it's based on what your shelf space is and usually what the consumer demand. They probably sell more small cans of soup than they do these larger cans of soup. Then we got trailer cube weight utilization. So you want to make sure that your packing doesn't overfill a truck. If you've got a box of certs or gum and it's in a box that you could put a refrigerator in, that's what they're talking about, is making sure that the packing is close to the size with enough protection in it. Warehouse space utilization, same thing. When it's on a trailer, that if it's in this packing, it's coming off of a shelf. So we want to make sure that the shelf space is not overburdened with packages that are too big. And then how well can we put it, handle it with a forklift or with material handling equipment? It could be put in a hopper, a box, and then sent down a carousel. So we want to make sure that it's in a small enough unit or a square enough unit to be stacked, to make sure that you can actually handle it with product moving equipment. Then we got the visual control, the identity. That's why most of those blister packs are clear, so you can actually see what you're buying. But if it's in some kind of protective box and casing, then the labeling has to be good, or there has to be some type of a visual picture of what's in that box. And ergonomics. We talked about this in the safety chapter in the CLA. Can I pick it up? Is it too heavy if there's 2? Well, then it only gets 1. Is there handles on the box? so I can actually know where to pick it up at? Is it marked where it says this side up or fragile, so I know how to handle it? So all of that's part of ergonomics. And then environmental concerns. If I got this thing packed full of styrofoam, is it like one light bulb in the size of a refrigerator box with all this packing material in there to make sure that light bulb gets to where it's supposed to go? So if I use a lot of packing material, there is regulations that state that you can't use more than 20% of the actual weight of the product. If you get above that, then you start getting into fines, and there's a lot of wasted, besides recycled or non-recycled material, there's a lot of wasted material in the packing end of it that adds cost. And the more packing that you got in there, the bigger the box is, the more space it takes up in a truck or on a shelf. So the environmental concerns are primary, but it also cuts into profit because you're making a bigger box than you need. And then the total cost of doing the packing itself. You're going to have a project where you take a live egg. I don't know if you can find a dead egg, but we don't want it boiled. You take a live egg. A lot of people aren't very creative in this project. They put it in an egg cart. Well, wow, that was quite a stretch of the imagination on how to keep an egg. But you are, as part of learning about packing, you're going to design a package that will allow you to drop this egg from a 2-story window and survive it. And so you're working on impact, shock, vibration, all those different things come into thinking when it comes to the packing for that project you got to do. And so you're going to take a picture of the packing material, the egg, the box, whatever you're going to use. Then you're going to pack it and you're going to take a picture so you can see the packing before you close the box. Then you're going to close the box, drop it. Ideally, you take a picture of where you're dropping it from so we can see that it's like the 10 or higher feet. If you don't live in a 2-story house, you can go and drop it out of a tree or what have you. Or you can put weight on it that equates to the impact that it would have if it hit the ground. Then you're going to take a picture after you drop it to see if the eggs made it or not. So that's your next project that's going to be due next week. I can tell you that some of the better ones that I've saw were the ladies are using those big Easter egg things and now around Easter, you're going to have big Easter eggs, but they use, I think Legs is the brand of nylons or whatever that come in. I think you can get leggings and stuff that come in them too. But I've seen a couple contraptions made with those blister packs that nylons come in, which aren't made of nylon anymore. But then they put newspaper or paper towels or something around the egg and put it inside it and then tape the crease around it and then drop that. They seem to protect it well enough. I've seen folks take huge boxes and this is just supposed to be an exercise to use the least amount of packing material. It's not an exercise to use everything you can find that you've got from Amazon, cram it in a box with an egg. That kind of defeats what we're trying to show you, is that there's all of these different concerns about over packaging. So we want enough to protect it, but not so much that it causes a recycle and a size for shipping and all that kind of stuff issue. So that's the parameters on it. But I'm looking for the most creative, and I actually keep those pictures. So I have like a Hall of Fame that you folks could get entered into, and I'll share that with you after you finish the project. And I've seen some real stretches of the imagination. And I've seen some good ideas that maybe the egg industry might want to adopt. One guy made a hammock, like he's put like a face mask inside the box, and then he taped the second one on top of it so the egg wouldn't come out of it. He suspended the mask inside a box and sent it, and it made it. So they use the materials you have. We got a ton of those face masks laying around to conduct the experiment. So that's something you can look forward to doing. It's fun, and you get to share it. It's going to be posted out in the discussion area so everybody can see what you did and share that with your classmates. If you want to make a video of you dropping it and opening it, that just makes it a lot more realistic, because in the classroom, we actually throw it out the window here and we do them live. So it's fun. Downtown, it's kind of become a thing where from the food court at the IFC, we'll line up the whole class and they drop it over at once. People in the that are eating and stuff saying, what was that about? And we've recruited a couple people to join our class just because you were doing your homework in the food court. So that's something that you're going to enjoy doing. So what kind of things are we protecting from in packaging? And this lists the big 5, 6 here. Shock, and that's what you're going to be doing with this egg, is trying to make sure that the impact when it hits the ground, that the egg survives it. Those eggshells are pretty strong. They're, nature's strongest packaging. It's surprising. I don't think you could hold an egg in your hand and squeeze it and break it. If it's a healthy chicken, which I know that end of it, there is a lot of seashell, and there's a lot of, that we put in their feed to make those shells stronger so they can take a drop, or they don't crack that easy if they're mishandled. So we had shock and compression. So if something's stacked on top of it, will it survive? In packaging, you got to think about that if you're sending a large order. Vibration. So say I'm sending it by train. Believe it or not, the train is a smooth ride. I mean, that rail is level and there's not a whole bunch of bumps on rails. Not much of a suspension on a rail car though. So if you do encounter like rough weather or something like that, where things start showing up on the track, it's the worst place to have something. But they're talking about vibration probably from trucks and aircraft. Most of the trucks now have air ride suspensions to keep the load from taking all the vibrations. But you've drove on Indiana roads and you've seen our potholes. So there's all the air ride in a helium balloon wouldn't help it. But so we're talking about vibration from actual transportation. And it could be even from forklifts picking up the box and moving around. There's vibration from that too. Moisture, there's a lot of things that don't do well when they get damp or wet. Electronics is one of those things. But nothing really should have moisture on it unless it's like a plant or a vegetable type shipment that's shipped that way. And so in those cases, you want to protect the moisture from leaving that cargo area in a truck. If you've got like boxes of flour and cereal and baby powder and all that stuff in the next compartment, you want to make sure that you're protecting through packaging any of those items that could be damaged by that moisture. Then we got heat and cold. Same thing for electronics or for frozen food. Heat's a bad thing. For cold, vegetables, if they get down too low, then they become soggy and they're meat. They're not very good. Cold affects other things that need to be at room temperature. So it says the level of protection, how much of this different padding and packaging you put in there, depends not only on the type of the product, but the value of the product. And so I could have a piece of electronic memory that costs several $100s to upgrade to make your game computer speak 50 different languages and project on a whole wall. And that one chip, if it's exposed to heat or vibration or moisture or it's dropped, it's ruined. It won't function. And so you can imagine the blister pack that comes in, and then when it's shipped, what kind of a carton that goes in. It's double walled and it has dividers and all this stuff in it to keep stuff from moving around. And it's usually not stacked very high. It's got restrictions where it goes on the top of a pallet, nothing gets put on top of it. And there's certain ways that they ship it. And so depending on what the value of it is, that can have a lot to do with how it's handled too. Okay, so here's a couple pictures of packing material. And there's there could be some interactions between the product and the packing material, like if something was in styrofoam and the inner packaging, the primary packaging got broke and it mixed with the styrofoam, it can make something that was toxic. If you were sending like paint thinner, I just ordered some of this. I'm painting now, trying to learn how to. I'm doing the Bob Ross stuff, with a big ass paintbrush. So I ordered some paint thinner, and you should have seen how I got it. It was in a box similar to this with all the peanut shells in it. And also in that I had canvases, from the same place and the paint thinner opened. And so they didn't put the paint thinner in any kind of a plastic bag or a secondary container. The paint thinner leaked all over the styrofoam, and then those styrofoam soaked with paint thinner stuck to the canvases. It ruined everything. So I opened that up. I go, oh, damn. Took a picture, and they didn't make me send it back to them. They just sent me another pack. This time the paint thinner had a plastic bag around it, and it was sealed pretty good, just in case the lid vibrated loose. So that stuff happens in real time every day in our lives. We got to make sure that the packaging is set up right. All right, so it talks about there could be requirements by the carrier on how things are packed. Like there's only so much weight that can go into a truck, and there's only so much volume or so many packages. And so taking that into consideration, is this something that would be better sent on 2 trailers? Is this something that would be better sent with like a partial truckload and then something lightweight they could pick up to complete the weight of the truck? So they have to look at whatever you're wanting to send and take into consideration how to best utilize that trailer space and the trailer weight that's available to it. And it talks about loading, that the heavier items are put in the front of the trailer. And so if you had to stop, something heavy in the very back wouldn't be pushed into some lighter weight items and crush it. And it's nice to have that weight over the hitch, the 5th wheel up in front, just to make sure that you got a good, secure, heavy load over it. The second place that there's heavy loads is over the axle, and that's to help with traction. And it helps distribute the weight more if it's between the axle and the front of the trailer. There's maximum weights whenever that truck goes into a weigh station. There's maximum weights that axle can weigh. And so another consideration when you're packaging is making sure it doesn't exceed the transportation mode that you're trying to send it. So if it's too heavy to go on a truck, we talked previously about different transportation modes, right? It's probably too heavy to put on a plane too. So what does that leave you to move that load? Did I put you all to sleep? Hello? How else could you move it if it's too heavy for truck? How do we move that?
I mean, are we talking about like moving it like across land, or? Sorry, I couldn't hear you. You're muted.
I said, yeah, it could be across land or across sea.
I mean, if it's too heavy for a truck, and if it's not across land, I would say by water.
Okay. How do I get it to the water?
Pre-assembled parts, or
yeah, you could do that, or by rail, right?
Yeah,
but then how do we get it to the rail? It's going to be the same deal. In larger manufacturers like John Deere and Massey Ferguson, some of these farm equipment places, they actually have a rail line that runs right to their manufacturing site. And so when they have a tractor that's too heavy to put on a truck, they drive it up on these rail cars. Sometimes they have to remove wheels and all that stuff after they get them on there. So yeah, rail has about 3 times, some of them have 4 times the capacity of a truck, each rail car. And a lot of it now is the condition of our bridges and our overpasses and stuff is what restricts how much weight a train can actually have on each car. But rule of thumb is 3 times the weight of a truck. So continuing on with chapter 4, I can stop my video here so I can give you more of a screen. This kind of has a picture of a unit load that's wrapped with the wrap. And I think this also has another picture of the pallets. Let me see. I thought, but no. But there's different types of these wrap machines that can be, you can see the cellophane coming down here. That's sort of like a bag that's going to go over it because it's predetermined size what the pallet would be. And if it's, I don't have anything. Oh, I got the eggs. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right. You rolling?
Yeah.
Good for you.
I gotta be.
Good for you, guys.
Thanks.
You want to introduce yourself while you're here? Come on around. Folks, the program chair is with me here today. I'd just like to have him sit down and introduce himself to you, just so you have a different voice too. You can lose the mask. Come on.
How's everybody doing?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Doing good. I'm Chris Reidner. I'm the supply chain program chair for the Indianapolis area. The guy that's teaching you here was my mentor, so learned a lot from him. You guys can learn a lot from him. I probably will be popping into some more classes here soon, but been kind of busy. But we are building this program, and if y'all ever need anything, you can reach out to me. I see a few names on here that I'm pretty sure I've taught before, so I know some of you already know me. So, but I'll let Merrill have his class back. I'm about to take off. We've been working on the lab today, so hopefully when we get back into this face-to-face, you guys can get into Lawrence and actually see how our lab is set up and looks and what we could do, and some of the stuff you're talking about, you'll be able to put some hands on. So I hope y'all have a great week.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's enjoying, don't forget your eggs.
Yeah.
These were laid this morning, so he gets the farm fresh. You know, he's still got hay sticking on there. I don't wash them because they got a natural chemical protector on them. They're good for 4 weeks out of refrigeration if you don't wash them. But those were refrigerated. Enjoy them. Hey, can you close that outside door for me if it's just me in here? Yeah, just the one going to the hallway. Okay. So that was good. You got to meet him. And again, he's probably going to be your primary instructor for transportation or for procurement. He's got his certifications in all of our classes, but those are 2 that he actually authored. So, yeah. And he wants to brag about his black belt he just got. So, yeah, he's like the certification ninja. It's kind of his, if you've ever got an email from him, his signature block is like 3 pages long. And he's got all those since he's been at Ivy Tech. So you folks can get those too. All right, so we're continuing now with packaging. And it really, the unit that we try to get to is a pallet, because you see the openings here at the bottom of it. You can actually get a fork in there, either from a manual pallet jack or different types of jacks. But it makes it much easier to load a trailer with machinery. I think we have a comparison here. It's going to show us here after the pallet wrappers about, we got power stretch wrappers. They actually put a little more tension on it. And then you got automatic power stretch wrappers, and they're completely automated, and they're usually part of a conveyor. So as stuff rolls down to get ready to be loaded, it's the last step before it gets put on the ground at the dock. Besides stretch wrapping, we have straps. You know, if it's something that could fall off, they could actually put these bands that are plastic or metal on there to keep it from coming off. And a major concern is about waste, is about the stuff that once it gets to where it's going, what do the people use it for? A lot of times pallets can come back, you know, those are reusable because they're a standard size, and usually they're wood. But other things like totes, like plastic boxes, people tend to use those for their shipping needs, storage needs. So they'll get used again. The costs associated with them may make that prohibitive for every package you get to come into a tote. But the different larger metropolitan cities are delivering things like from Amazon and food stores in those totes. And when you get your next order, it picks up the last tote. And they use drones, and they got people that are making those deliveries using that. That way your stuff's not touched from the place that it was put together. If it was food or if it was an order that you selected, it cuts down on a lot of the packing when we use those totes. Getting back into the packaging and labeling, we've got packages, so we've seen what these look like, and there's a lot of information on this bad Oscar. It's telling you basically who the shipper was, that's USPS, the weight, it's telling the date that it left, to the address that it came from, who it was shipped to, and then it also has within that barcode all the information about what the product is, where it came from, where it's going to go through to get to you. And so all of that on that label, and these labels can be shrunk down to smaller size, or they can be bigger depending on what type of material that you're shipping them in. But the basic label information makes sure that the right product gets to the right place at the right time. So when we're verifying it, it's saying, once it's checked for accuracy before it's shipped, accuracy involves several criteria. And depending on what it is, if it's a very high value shipment, there might be more than one person that does a check with it. If it's something that's perishable, there might be a high priority to get that shipment going because it's got flowers or food or whatever that has to get to the other end as quick as possible. But all of this gets verified, and all of the data gets entered to let them know that it's on the way. So now we're loading it, making sure that, remember, it's going to talk to you every time about that dangerous spot between the trailer and that loading ramp or the dock. And we want to make sure that equipment's only used by certified operators. Everywhere you go, you're going to have some type of a license to operate those forklifts. We've got a forklift simulator in our classroom, our lab. So you can actually simulate operating different types of forklifts. It's got a big screen in the front. I mean, it shows like a wraparound screen, and you're actually operating controls that are the same as a forklift. If you don't raise it high enough, you get an error, and they'll show a video of you tipping it. If you run over somebody, it shows, a big splat. It's like a video game that lets you get the feel of what the different controllers do and what could happen if you're not experienced with it. So you get a couple hours on that simulator. When you actually get on the equipment, it takes the learning curve way down. It without the danger. So you got your licensed certified operators using the forklift equipment. Trucks or trailers are securely chocked. And then you got that hydraulic dock lever, that dock lock. You got a green light saying that lock is engaged. You got pallets that are checked to ensure they haven't shifted or separated. So they've been sitting out here in stays. They've been moved around a couple times. You want to make sure they're not leaning like the Tower of Pisa or something. And heavy pallets you're going to put in the front, and then you're going to use proper lifting techniques if you got to actually manually load anything in there. I'm looking for this process is staging and everything. So, but I think that the time level that it was specifying here was like 5 to 1. It takes 5 times longer to manually load it than to use the forklifts. This loading technique has inflatable bags. They call them dunnage bags that keeps those boxes from shifting. There was a little bit of space left over in the trailer. And so they put these bags in there, inflated them, and it makes sure that everything stays in where it's supposed to. Some shippers have specialized trailers that have latches and places for walls to hook to. They got bars that go across to keep sections of the trailer partitioned off. They have strap harnesses so they can use rope or straps to hold the loads in place. So depending on what they usually use, they could have netting, walls, straps, slip sheets to separate the different parts of the load. So it says here, for example, a floor-loaded trailer can take 5 hours to unload, but a palletized load can be unloaded in as little as 20 or 30 minutes. So there you have it. It's more than 5 to 1. It's incredible. It's about 6 to 1. So you do want to make sure that you use pallets or some type of machine acceptable way of building your loads out. Okay. So here's saying one other hot spot here is that stretch wrapping a pallet allows the loader to stack goods up to 7 feet high on a pallet. I've seen that, and I mean, it's operator really has to know how to select the product and stack a pallet, and then the shrink wrap or the power wrap has to be really tight to move a 7-foot pallet if it has a lot of smaller boxes on it. If it's just too high and it's like toilet paper or something, that's not such a great feat, you know, wrapping 2 boxes together to go 7 foot high. It's when you got those smaller boxes that are within that load, wrapping that and making it stay straight and tight, that's a work of art. And sometimes they'll have third-party folks that are working on loading. And so if you've got a third party, that we could actually hire them to come in and say, all right, you're coming in with a truck and a trailer, disconnect it right here, have a nice day. And so that allows the driver to move over to the other side and maybe pick up a trailer that's on outbound, or to move on to their next load that they're going to pick up. And then they'll have like a smaller truck that they call them spotter trucks or yard mules. And it's basically just a 1-seater thing that has glass windows all the way around. So they got a really good clear vision, and it's much shorter than a truck is. So you can turn a lot easier, but it has that 5th wheel on it so they can pick up the trailers, and it's just much easier to move them around in a confined space like this lot to get them lined up with dock doors and to get them set up for the next shift to load up trailers or what have you. They even, if say there's trailers that are loaded and they're done early, say an hour or so early, these spotters will come and take that loaded trailer and move it off to a staging area so that dock door is available for another empty trailer to come in and actually pick up. So those yard trucks or those spotter trucks, they are worth their weight in gold. So that kind of covers packaging. And again, you're going to enjoy that egg drop experiment when you get to that. Any questions about Chapter 4 on packaging? Okay, I think I have a quickie little exercise for us to do. I didn't want you to come in and just hear yakking for the whole time. So I've got us an exercise. And so let me see if I can get this thing to go big for me. And then let me see if I can share the right screen. Okay, so here's a couple items. I'm not sure what that bottom one is. It kind of looks like a iPad or some type of a screen with there. But the top, you got fish. And so if you're going to pack that, what kind of considerations do you have to take into effect with fish? Tell me what you would pack for the item, and then for a bulk, and then the secondary, and then for the transportation shipping. What would be the 3 different packing things that you would do?
I This is David. I would say if I'm packing fish, right? If it's coming in like straight to the warehouse or whatever we're gonna call it, I would say it probably has to be put into a big container that has like ice in it to make sure it doesn't start to go bad.
Okay.
And then from there, and smaller containers still iced or in a frozen area, so they can go to its specific stores that it's gonna go to. That's gonna sell it, and then once it's sold to the individual customer, I want to say in a baggie, and then wrapped up with like the I think it's called like butcher's paper. I think that's what it's called.
Okay. Yeah.
So that the customer can go ahead and take it. But like I said, inside exactly, it doesn't like start to leak or anything like that, and it stays. Everything stays on the inside.
Okay. Good. I have a couple relatives that are nutty about seafood, and so when I make a trip to Florida, I try to ship them some seafood like that I caught. I like to catch it myself, and so they normally at the dock or whoever if you're like on a boat or something, they have you clean your fish, and then they vacuum seal it in some type of a package wrapper, and then you put it in a styrofoam box like a cooler, and then they either put dry ice packs or they put some chemically frozen packs that go in there on top of the fish, and it can be in shipping for like 3 to 5 days if it's sent that way. And so that I've personally done that from like fishing expeditions in Canada, or just trying to get some seafood to relatives from Florida. How about since I don't know what that is, we're going to go to the next one. It's some kind of old technology I think they're trying to show us. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so we got a laptop and we got potato chips. Who wants to take one of those?
I can try the potato chips.
All right, who we got?
Oscar.
Okay, go for it.
Well, once they get made, they probably go into their separate little bags. And then once they go into their separate bags, they get put into boxes where they have enough space where they don't get crushed. And they probably won't stack them as high or with too much weight on top of each other, just so the item won't get messed up. And I'm not sure if they will go straight to a warehouse or to the stores. But
Okay. They may go to a distribution center or something, since they get spread across so many different retail sites.
yeah, but that's not something you would sit on too long, would it be?
No, they have a shelf life, but some of those can go for like 6 months or so. I don't know how tasty they'd be, but there is actually when you take transportation, I haven't taught it probably in 6 months now, but there is a case that you do about potato chips, and you're going to learn that every product has a transportation classification code. And so let's say if it was glass, it would be like a code 1 to 10 because it's highly breakable. And so potato chips, they fall into this classification 1 to 10 because they're highly crushable. Well, if they got that high number in there, when they start figuring out how much they're going to charge you to move it, it gets multiplied into the weight and into the distance. And so sending the potato chips like this, let's just say that it costs $100 to send a trailer load of potato chips. If they change to like the Pringle version, the ones that are in the protective can and they're all uniformly stacked, they move out of that high risk crushing classification, and they got like a 30 or a 40 instead of a 10 or less as far as vulnerability. Plus, when they're those canisters, they can stack them higher because the canisters can take the weight of a canister on top of it, or 2 or 3 or 4. And because the canisters hold more chips than a bag of chips, the canisters way more. And so the project basically asks you, is it going to cost them more to make those potato chips in these canisters because now they're going to be heavier and you're going to pay more for freight, but you're going to have more chips as far as value on that load than you would with the airbags, you know, because you're shipping 60% of that's air inside of a bag when you buy a bag of potato chips. So it was pretty interesting. They did the research and found out that staying with the airbag was cheaper for the producer, the consumer. The only people that really lost out was the trucking company. The other way, it's a little more expensive for the producer to get them shipped, and that means that you as a customer, you're going to pay more for a can of Pringles than a bag of chips because it costs more from the transportation perspective to get it to you. So it was kind of an interesting concept there. Meanwhile, back at the, who wants to take a laptop? How would we pack and ship a laptop? I know we got more than 2 people on here. Come on.
I can try it.
All right, who we got?
Logan,
All right, go for it.
I think for a laptop, you'd probably put it in some kind of protective case, you know, with something with like a little padding in it. And laptops, you know, they have to be like, there's different versions every year. So you have to take that into consideration. So it can't just go to a warehouse or anything. It has to go to where it's going to be sold. So another thing with laptops is laptops are very fragile. They can't overheat at all. So you might have to put them in a temperature controlled truck if you're driving in hot weather. So that's another consideration you have to take into when shipping laptops. So, and you can't really, I mean, you can stack the cases kind of, but you can't stack them too high. So like, I would think kind of like a van with like the racks inside of the trailer that hold it and keep it secure. So that way they don't stack them too high and that they can still transport a lot.
Okay.
A big thing is waterproofing with technology.
So moisture.
Yes.
That's a big factor.
Yes.
So this needs to have some type of plastic wrapping on one of those layers of packaging. And then it has to be handled in a dry material environment. Good catch. This is this is a prehistoric laptop that's got a drive on it. Or that could have been somebody saying, I want to add that added in there because I got a bunch of old movies and stuff. But remember kitting. When you think about laptop, you're going to hear that term kitting is when they put together everything that laptop needed for the customer, like the mouse, if they want an external keyboard, if they wanted that drive, software. So that's just a reminder about that particular term. Okay, last one. Somebody want to take staples or glassware?
If nobody takes it, I can try it again.
All right, go for it.
I'm gonna go with the cups. So
All right.
the cups, it's a very fragile item, so it needs to have a special packaging and secure packaging, not really loose or anything like that. So I know in most cups that you would buy, kind of has like the dividers on the inside to make sure it's like an exact fit, but also would have some type of like styrofoam on the inside, or if not, some type of like paper mache or something to go ahead and secure it and as you're getting it together. I know it can get kind of heavy, so you can't really stack it too high without it causing like a tip over as it's being stacked on the pallet. And so like I said, it'll probably, like you said earlier, the word kitting, because it's not just more than likely one style of cup or one same cup. You have to get probably more than likely like the small cups and the bigger cups in there. And like I said, secure wrapping, more than likely it gets saran wrapped as well. And then, yeah, it'll get sent out to the individual distribution area. to get sorted out. Let's say, for example, like Kohl's or something like that, that's going to sell them. It'll go to like the Kohl's distribution area. And then from there, get separated out into the trucks to go to the different stores that it's going to go and be separated from there.
Good deal. Good deal. And these boxes, every one I've ever got, have this side up and fragile glass on them.
Yeah.
So your labeling is to let people know that there is an issue that they need to be aware of. These next couple slides are those different variables that we have to protect from: heat and cold, vibration. I guess that was shock. Moisture. Now we got vibration. I guess heat and humidity. Electrical. I mean, some stuff like that laptop needs to have no static. It needs to be in a static-free environment too. So there's a lot of stuff you have to take in considerations when you're handling the electronics. Okay. That was chapter 4. Chapter 5, inventory control. Let's move this back over to this page now. See if I can fix it to go to the right one again. Here we go. Okay, so inventory comes into 3 different phases or types. We got raw materials, work in progress, anything that's not ready to sell, and then finished goods. That's anything that is packaged and ready to sell. And so you've got in manufacturing, a lot of times they have inventory that is costing them money. It has a value. Let's say you've got this warehouse full of steel or wood. It has a value, but it's really not it's not a finished product, so they can't sell it. They bought the raw material. Their job is not to sell raw material, it's to process it. And so when it's raw material, it really is not an asset. It's a liability. Now it's something that's getting older and obsolete and damaged and stolen and everything else. So we try to keep down the raw materials. Work in progress, normally they don't take raw materials and start a process with them unless they have got an order that they're specifically filling. And so let's say this dude here is making furniture. They wouldn't make 50,000 chairs and say, okay, we got all of our stuff made. No, if they had 5 chairs that were supposed to be sold, they'd make the 5 chairs. They wouldn't make anything that wasn't part of an order. And one of the things in the previous chapter about packaging, it talks about IKEA, that their furniture, they make all the components and they ship those in boxes, disassembled. So it's cheaper for them to ship it to the US, and it's easier for customers to carry it home in their cars. So they don't have to get a trailer or anything to move their purchase. I can tell you it's not fun once you get it home where you got 10,000 screws and bolts and all these odd shaped pieces of wood, and they got instructions on one piece of paper, and it's in a foreign language or something. But yeah, that's how they handle their work in progress. For IKEA, their work in progress is the boxed, finished, unassembled furniture. And so we got those 3 types of inventories. And from that, we talk about turning the inventory. So my brother, who owned a new car dealership in Lexington, and he had 2 used car dealerships. One of them was open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And one of them, that was sunrise. And then one was open from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and that was called midnight. So he had this brand new car dealership, and all the trade-ins that he got from it, he put on either his AM or his PM lot. He had a weird way that he decided what went on which lot. So let's figure if it had 4 doors and it was a grocery getter, like a work truck or something, he put that on the AM lot. If it was a hot rod with a custom paint job or some killer stereo, he put that on the PM lot. And so when he was, I think there was 200 spots on his new car lot, maybe it was 1,200, and he sold somewhere around 75 cars a month. On his AM lot, he had 20 spots, and he sold probably 10 or 15 cars a month at that one. On his PM slot, he only had 10 slots, but he sold 40 cars or more every month. And so if we look at turnover, inventory turnover, that PM slot, they had to fill the cars up there 4 or 5 times a month just to keep the lot full. If you look at his new car, he only got one truckload, you know, with 8 or 10 cars on it a week with all of those spots to keep up with his inventory. So the value of that used car dealership with the 10 spots was making him more money than the other 2. And that's how important having the right inventory and turning over the inventory more than once. That ratio is where you make your money on the space that you're actually having the inventory occupy. So if you had inventory for, say, Christmas stuff, and it's July, that is dead space because nobody's buying anything for Christmas in July. And so you have to have a way that you're going to prioritize what you have in your inventory. And they have different ways that they do that. One is called the ABC method. And the A's in your inventory are about 20%. They're the most valuable and they turn over the most. And so that would be like that PM lot is the A. And so that one is inventory pretty close, and it's given premium space in the warehouse because we got to get to it so often because it has high turnover. People buy it every day or every hour or what. When you got B inventory, that's sort of the stuff that is sometimes asked for, and it's not as a high demand as an A, but there is like a steady demand for it. That'd be like the AM lot where he does sell stuff there, you know, as long as he has 4 doors and trucks and, you know, work and grocery getters. But it's not near the in turnover that A has. So you got A and B and C. This is about 20% of your inventory that just doesn't move. This is where the Christmas ornaments are. And it's stuff that can get, you know, out of season, or it's obsolete because it's an older laptop or something that is in your inventory, or it's something that's discontinued that now your customers don't want it anymore. So it's costing you in shelf space and in utilities and all that. You probably want to work on getting rid of that C inventory as quick as you can. So ideally, you set up your warehouse with the A inventory at the waist level, and it's near the ends of the beginnings of each aisle so that your order selection can happen quickly. The B stuff can go on down that aisle in the middle. The C stuff goes way up high and way far back, you know, so it doesn't have premium shelf space. So we got the way the warehouse gets set up is you got receiving and shipping, which we learned about in chapters 1 and 2. And it comes into a barcode system in the warehouse management system. And then it gets either picked from the order coming in and shipped over to the other side, or it gets put on a shelf. And then this automation is the reports telling what the inventory is and where it's at, how much more we need of one thing or how much too much we have of another. And then, of course, you got shelving, and is where we work on the inventory management, where we're putting the high volume stuff at the end of the aisles. We're putting the heavier stuff on the floor. We're putting the medium volume or the B volume stuff in the middle of the shelves. And then the C volume is the stuff seldom used, or it's excess A or B inventory. So just in time, that is a very lean driven type of inventory, where if I just, let's say I'm making 50 engines today, And so I'm going to need 50 starters to put on those engines. My supplier for the starters shows up with the 50 starters before production lines that need it. And so I don't have to have any space dedicated for, 500 starters or 1,000 starters. I know that there's a truck that's going to show up here prior to the shift, and those starters will be setting right at the position where they're mounted to the engines. And so that's pretty risky if the truck doesn't show up. And then you got to stop the whole production line for that car just because there wasn't starters to put on the engine before it went in the car. And so there's a lot of high risk in it, but it's a lot of high reward. But what we found was most of the manufacturing on this planet happens in China. And when the COVID pandemic kicked in and we weren't taking ships from China, we couldn't get spare parts for cars. We couldn't get components for cars. We couldn't get components for air conditioning or heaters or electronics. We couldn't even get the medication and the masks that we needed to fight against the COVID pandemic. So we found that just-in-time inventory had some major risk associated with it. And so supply chains are reevaluating how they want to work with their inventories, and they want to have more domestic manufacturing, more domestic storage. They want to have the stuff available on this side of the ocean. And so there's a whole different retooling that's going on right now to answer to future emergencies like that. I mean, granted, this may not happen for another 100 years, but it did happen and we weren't prepared for it. And so we tend to overreact to make sure that we're ready for the next time. And if any of you are out there that are working in the industry, you're probably seeing this where there's a high volume of stuff that's being brought in and stored, and that your new suppliers are stateside, and that you're probably paying a little bit more for it because you used U.S. labor to build it, or they bought larger bulks from China, and now you're paying for their storage and overhead because they had to store the larger volume. But you could probably attest to that there is an increase in price that's going to happen because we aren't using just in time. It's the cheapest way to do a supply chain. If you got a steady transportation system, it's the cheapest way because I don't have to buy inventory. I just have it show up when I need it. I'm not out any money. The opposite of that is I got all these warehouses with parts in it that I don't need for another 3 months. I'm just paying for that raw material or work in progress part that's not the finished product. And so the just in time is the direction we want to get to as quick as we can. So this talks about having a minimized inventory, understanding what is needed and being able to respond to your customers' needs. But it's also making sure that you have the right amount in your inventory. And sometimes it's better to have more than you need than less than you need. So on the more than you need, you're paying for this overhead and your shelf space and all that. What happens when you have less than you need?
I mean, you'll have a shortage. You won't be able to do anything.
Okay. And so that shortage,
if it's dependent on it, I guess.
yeah.
But whatever, as to whatever you have to do, I mean, it kind of stops everything else. It's a ripple effect.
Yes. And so your reputation is priceless, is basically the mindset. And so if I promised or I have a contract to deliver and I don't because I have this shortage in my inventory, the cost of doing business is that customer could maybe wait until your back order comes in. That's probably about 10% of the time. Or that customer goes to your competition and buys from them, and then you lose that customer. So that is a heavy price to pay if you've got a shortage. So it's always smarter to go a little bit more in inventory than a little bit less. but not a whole lot less or a whole lot more. So it's kind of a fine line there that you're trying to figure out. So we got the right material, and it's in the right condition. It has to be sellable. It can't be damaged, and it has to come to the right place at the right time. So we already went through the ABC inventory, and this is where it tells you in depth about it. And we mentioned this FIFO and LIFO last week. First in, first out, or last in, last out. So you've already got that if it is the first in, it's probably the oldest thing in your inventory. If it's perishable, or if it's something that could become not a market usable, you want to sell that as quick as possible. If it's technology, you probably are selling the newest iPhone or the newest laptop, or so the last in would be the first thing that you sold. And then it kind of gives the parameters we just talked about. Cycle times. So a cycle time is the time it takes to say, I need this until I've got it and I've sent it to my customer. So the order is requested from the customer. It comes into the supply chain system through manufacturing. Then it gets built. Then it gets shipped and delivered. And so depending on what it is, a cycle time could be, a day. It could be a week. If it was doing business with China, it was probably 4 weeks because of the time it took to get to us. They could manufacture it immediately, but the time it took to get it to us, unless it was something that could be air transported, electronics or high value stuff, they would just fly it over. So when we look at cycle ordering, it could be time-based, where like on the 1st and the 15th, I'm going to get so many items sent to my organization. Or it could be a fixed order system where it's like I get 10 of these in my shelf, and as soon as it drops down to 5, I'll need 5 to replenish it, so I have 10 of these on my shelf. So we got time, and then we got fixed order that we use for cycle times. So when we look at accountability for inventory, there's a lot of expense in doing these inventories where you actually audit it and you go out and you actually touch or see your inventory. And so what is normally done is you figure there's 12 months in a year. And if you do 10% of your inventory each month, you'd see 120% of your inventory over those 12 months. So you'd see some things more than once. But that way, instead of just inventorying everything from start to finish, closing down the shop and spending 2 or 3 days with no access to your inventory, you just do a part of it. And so if you look at 10% of your inventory, you can spread that over 30 days, where you could actually have 1 or 2 people take care of that for you. Not so if you've got 15 million pieces in your inventory, like an Amazon center. They need somewhere around 1,500 line items inventoried each day. And so they use automation for that. They use drones and robots to go up and down aisles. Of course, there's going to be the human factor involved in that too. But when they use automation, they tend to have a more accurate count and a quicker count. And they're not paying for labor. They pay for inventory, or the automation. It was pretty high speed and high expense. But now they don't have to pay overtime or anything. They can have the machine run all holiday weekend or what have you. So they do the manual counts or they do the automated counts, but there is certain requirements as you do inventories for tax purposes, to make sure that your software and your actual physical count match. You want to make sure that there hasn't been any pilfering or damage or anything that's missing. But when we're doing this random count, sometimes it's just like a pull it out of the hat kind of thing, where either the software will say, go see if this item is on the shelf and how many of them are there. And so if that one's right, then that gives you a lot more confidence that the rest of the inventory is right. We just did a random one. If it's a cycle count, like we were talking about before, where you're inventorying 10% of it, then there is a piece of the inventory. They know they've already seen 8 months of the inventory. They only need to see another 2 months and they'll have 100% of the inventory. And so that tells you, here is saying that ABC, A items are counted 8 times a year, B items are counted 4 times a year, and C items are counted 2 times a year. So depending on, again, how you've got your inventory set up would dictate the times and the amount of times that you would actually inventory it. So we've got most mistakes are human errors. That's in anything. But so automating is what we're trying to get everything to, where when it enters into the system, there's an automated transaction showing that it's there. When it leaves the inventory, there's an automated transaction showing it left. And then there's transactions showing who ordered it, where'd it go, when did it get there, all that stuff. So the technology is increasingly better as they come up with more ways to take the human factor out of it. So how do they get this information into the warehouse system? Most of the times there's labels that have these barcodes or chips in them, and they will go through those scanners that we saw in the material handling chapter in chapter 3 of the CLA. Or it could be hand scanned with some type of a device, your finger laser or some type of a gun that you point that picks it up. But it actually lets you take a physical item that has a label on it and put it into an automated data collection. So now it's part of the inventory electronically. The flow of the materials is talking about electronically how long it would take for that item to be located, loaded, sent to the shipper, how long it would take for it to go from raw materials to a finished product. We already know what cycle times and low flow rates are for all of the items that are in our inventory. So we have directional devices, like when you have things that are going down on different types of roller systems or conveyors. Some of them push, some of them pull, some of them divert, some of them tilt, and some of them change the direction of where that item's going. So we can use automation to be the person, instead of having a person sort and separate where things go in the warehouse, the scanned label tells it where it belongs and it sends it on a route to that position. Signage and labeling, it helps when the humans have to get involved in it, like going down aisles at a grocery store. You'll see one that says bread, you'll see one that says dairy products, one that says health and beauty aids. It's the same thing in a warehouse. They will have labeling and barcodes to allow automated and human interaction to go and make sure that that's where it's supposed to be. Reverse logistics. We had to do a project in chapter 1 about your garbage and what in there could be reused, what could be recycled, and what was just straight up going to the dump. Reverse logistics is running through the cycle that we talked about for selecting an item and for packing it and for shipping it. It's doing it backwards, where that item, I didn't want it. And so now it comes back from shipping, it gets unpacked to check and make sure that it's inspectable and that it's still sellable, it's not damaged, and to see if the customer's complaint is valid, you know, to make sure that it didn't operate or it was the wrong size or whatever. And then it's put back into the inventory. Most places don't directly put it back into the inventory. Most places hire a third party or another company to take all their returns, like Walmart does, Target, what have you, because they have limited shelf space, limited warehouse space. They have a third warehouse that just does returns. And so when it gets there, they're going to see if it's what is supposed to be in the package. They'll find if it's resellable, and then they can put it back into the system. They'll have it shipped over to Walmart's warehouse and put back in the system. Or if it's something that got damaged truly, or it was missing a part, they'll label that on the box. And you could usually buy that at a discount at like Big Lots, or you could buy it online, one of these salvage companies, or just at their website. Walmart has new and used, so does Amazon. They have used returned items that they sell. But this reverse logistics, it can cost 5 to 10 times more to handle that product the second time than it did processing it out to ship it out the first time. And so some retailers and some sellers on Amazon are saying, don't send it back. Say if it was something that was under $5, it's going to cost them $15 to put it back into the system and into the inventory. So they lose $10 for a $5 object that they mail to you. They just soon you keep it. And so if they track that and they say, well, every time this person orders something, they end up wanting to send it back, it's under $5, so we give it to them. We've let them keep 50 things over the last month. Maybe we need to not be giving them that option anymore. So it's really depending on the customer and the situation, but a lot of times they just say, keep it. Okay. You always want to look at these terms to know, because on the exam, they're going to ask for definitions, and having these at the end of this book, just like in the CLA, I think there was 45 terms in the end of CLA. I think there's like 43 terms at the end of the CLT. Reviewing these terms and what their definitions are as a refresher would be a good idea. So here's some of the historical reasons things are returned. Poor quality, damaged or defective, unneeded inventories from over forecasting, seasonal inventories, out of date inventories, remanufacturing and refurbishment of products. So that's the reason that things are in a reverse logistics. There are some things that fall outside of that, but that's the major ones. So return goods can be handled in different ways: returned to inventory, refurbished for resale, sold to an alternate market, broken down into reusable components, or stored for recoverable, sorted for valuable materials. In other words, they recycle it. They take all the gold, silver, metals out of it. So depending on the amount of damage or the value of the product is probably how it's handled as to if it's resold, restored, or it's just melted down. Okay, so frontline material operators, which are these people that are handling boxes, stacking them on pallets and things of that nature, they're not normally involved in the financial aspect, but they are involved in inspecting return merchandise, entering that information into the warehouse management system. So they're going to scan it and saying it's ready to be put back on the shelf. Then they're going to put stage those return items for storage. They're going to actually get them back on the shelf, and then they're going to dispose of items if they're not going to be able to keep them. I know one of the things that Sears, I don't know if any of you ever shopped at Sears before it went out of business, but they had a guarantee for life on a lot of their name brand stuff, the tools and the Craftsman tools. They would take used tools, you know, that were broke or whatever. People would bring them in and they'd say, okay, go get one off the shelf. You take your broke wrench in, you walk out there with a brand new wrench. Well, at the end of the day, the clerks would throw the wrenches into the dumpster. And I had a friend that was a dumpster diver. That was his hobby. You know, he put a kid through college just taking stuff out of dumpsters. It was, for him, it was like prospecting for gold. And he'd get into any dumpster, no matter how funky or wherever it was at a construction site. But Sears dumpster was his favorite spot. He would go there every day. And so he'd take all the stuff, the broken tools out of the dumpster, and he'd give them to relatives, say, hey, Merry Christmas. Say, what's this? And they said, it's a brand new wrench. Like, no, it ain't, it's broke. Not if you walk into Sears, it's not. And so they were throwing out stuff instead of properly disposing of it, is what I'm trying to get the point of here. Once it gets in the dumpster and they have permission to remove stuff from the dumpster, it belonged to my friend Daryl. So it was his to do whatever he wanted with. He gave it to relatives because they started recognizing him coming in with stuff. They're like, hey, yesterday we had this same painted red screwdriver that had the tip broke off on it. You got one too? He says, there it is. So they had to give him a new screwdriver. He presented them with a broken one. So that's the kind of thing that can happen if returned items aren't handled properly for final disposition. Okay, so any questions about chapter 5? I had an exercise set up for that, but it was a crossword puzzle. That's a little bit tough to do in a virtual setting, so we'll pass on doing the crossword puzzle. I can tell you that doing 3 chapters in a day, it's a bit of a mind-numbing experience for you, I'm sure. But take a look at the videos that are out there. You folks are working ahead. I'm still grading. You guys have worked so much ahead. And you can review those Opus Works sections for these. I mean, they're pretty in-depth. But again, I would recommend that you actually crack the textbook before you head off to the test site. And you can have this textbook open when you are doing your Opus Works assignments. I don't know about using it during the test. You're going to have a proctor that I don't believe you're allowed to have anything out while you're taking the test. We got anybody on here that can give us the feedback on that? So let me stop the recording here.